Alright, so welcome back. In today's video, I have with me a pretty hopped up Yamaha YXZ 1000 side-by-side. This is Matt Ling's personal car. It was built by K&T Performance in Utah. Collaboration with K&T and Cody Phillips Racing, me going through and doing some of the wiring and setting up the MoTeC system on this particular build. I won't get into a lot of the specifics about the setup on the motor or the turbo system or any of that. I just kind of want to go through and showcase all the things on the MoTeC, what we do on these side-by-sides with the system. We make them for the Razor, all the Razor lineup. So the 1000, the XP Turbo 925, we make them for the 900, and we make them for a Z1 swap. We also make them for an APEC swap. So, and we'll get into some other videos on that, but all this stuff's available on our website at www.codyphillipsracing.com, or you can contact K&T to get one of these MoTeC systems for the side-by-side. So in today's video, I just want to touch through some of the features on this car. It does have a MoTeC C127 dash. It also has a keypad 15 to go through and get full functionality out of the system. There's a lot of things you can do on the fly. You don't need to do a reflash to turn your boost up and down or run different fuels or that sort of thing. This particular car runs on ethanol. We run it on Ignite Red fuel. We've also ran it on VP fuel. So it does have flex fuel capability inside the ECU. And with that, you can simply just fill up the tank with race fuel and then fill it up with E85. Drive it around and not have to do anything to the tune. Everything just happens in the background automatically. So obviously we dyno tune for both fuels, but this system has knock capability, traction control for the street cars. I mean, kind of the sky's the limit on it. So I really want to get into what we've got here for the side-by-side, so I'll just phase the video out now and show you kind of on screen with the MoTeC dash and give you some functionality live. So. Alright, so I'm inside the car now. As you can see, this is kind of the dash layout of the YXZ. So you've got your standard gauge pod that just stays. And we went ahead and mounted the C127 here on this carbon piece with the keypad above it. Now all the factory functions stay in these YXZ kits. So the power steering still works, the factory fuel gauge still works. We have a different fuel pump in this car, so the sending unit is out. But the TAC works, the speedo, four-wheel drive system and switches, all that stuff remains. Factory headlights still function. So these things are really plug and play. They're seamless. The install is pretty simple. It actually replaces where the stock ECU goes. So these kits are a jumper that we build here and basically just plugs into the factory harness, and then the MoTeC goes right under this center console here. All the communications on it is done through an Ethernet cord using the M1 Tune software, which is a free download. So, all right, well, let's get right to it on the features on the dash and whatnot. So this is basically a warm-up screen, and this is just here to give you kind of some criticals. This is using one of the MoTeC dash templates that's available. On my other video, we went through a custom display creator screen. This is the standard template, which generally meets most people's needs. So we've got RPM here, coolant temp. We actually have oil temp on this car as well. We're going to look at the ambient pressure that's basically our barometric pressure where we sit here. We're going to look at oil pressure. We have fuel pressure. And then our lambda, just sitting there with the sensor warmed up, is at 1.2. This will also tell us any closed loop trim that's happening while the engine is running during a warm-up phase. So the system does have closed loop fuel control, where you basically are going to assign a target lambda under all conditions, and the ECU is constantly going to be trying to hit that. So if you're going up a dune and you're at wide open throttle and you have a target lambda of, say, 0.8 or 0.75 or 0.76 or whatever you decide for your target lambda for your engine, if you're off target, the ECU has the ability to move the fueling automatically and actually hit your target lambda. So you can come back after a run, pull a data log, and see how much closed loop, whether it's giving fuel or taking fuel away. So we're constantly analyzing that, because that's the good thing about the system is if you're off on your fuel table, it's going to make slight adjustments to get you back on target, and of course ultimately keep the tune-up better and save the engine under some wide open conditions. So air temp, vehicle speed, we use the factory wheel speed sensor on the trans for this, and we've also got throttle, so I can change the throttle angle. This still uses the 3 individual throttle bodies on this car. So you can check to make sure your TPS is functioning and everything's zeroed out. So that's kind of the warm-up screen. More stuff here. There is an onboard G meter inside these dashes. It's free to use. There's not any unlock code or anything for the G meter. So we just kind of make sure that that thing is zeroed before we use it, or before we make any sort of runs or anything. The other thing that's cool about the MoTeC system is it can do what's called a fuel used calculation. So as you can see down here, fuel tank percentage is 97%. So it can calculate how much fuel the engine is using through the injectors, because we're watching fuel pressure, and we know we tell it what type of injector we're using, and we know how much fuel down to the microliter that injector will flow under those conditions, and you can send that information up to the dash. People ask, well, why is that important? Well, for example, on some cars you end up removing the fuel gauge, or you remove the fuel sender because you got 2 pumps in the tank or whatnot. This particular car, you can still have 1 in the tank and use the factory gauge cluster. But since we don't have that, we just keep track of the fuel used on this particular car. And then anytime that Matt fills the car up, we can do what's called a fuel reset, and I'll get into that in just a minute. But this is kind of our warm-up screen. Also on the warm-up screen, one thing real quick. Cycle through these pages. Up top here is voltage meter, and then here is the gear position. So I can roll it into first gear, roll it into second, roll it back to neutral, and we're just using the onboard factory gear position sensor that's in the trans. So we always know what gear we're in. We can use it in the system to do boost by gear, or some other things in there as well by gear. So, all right, to get to a different screen, all you have to do is hold down next, and this will put us into the race screen. The cool thing about this is we can program what temperature we want this to change. So as we're on the warm-up screen, we start the car, it starts to get warm, we're checking the vitals, we're making sure we got oil pressure, make sure we got fuel pressure, and 130, 140 degrees, we can have it automatically just switch to this screen. This is again a MoTeC stock dash template that you can use in the software. These are free to use, not with the display creator that I showed the other day. So we can keep track of voltage here, we can keep track of the fuel level. We also have alarms set up that if the fuel level gets low, it'll turn on some of these lights on the side or on the top. So you can set these alarms in these dashes to do kind of whatever you want. But we put Matt's name in here, so we got Ling. We've got vehicle speed, oil temp, coolant temp. So all the temps on this side, all the pressure is pretty much on this side. So we use a 5-bar map sensor in this, so we get real boost pressure, not just a mechanical gauge that can always be thrown off. We've got oil pressure and fuel pressure in here as well. The next screen will kind of show us different boost aim levels. So we can take this button here and we can turn our boost up or down on the fly. So the way that I have this programmed is through 6 different positions. And as you push this, you'll see it count up through the different positions. So on the fly, you can have it in just drive around mode, whatever your wastegate is. And then if you want to turn the boost up, you just simply go here on the fly, and you can go up to whatever your maximum target of boost is. So actually works out pretty good. You can just do everything on the fly, no reflash in the ECU. Somebody pulls up next to you and you want to let them have it, you just kind of hit a couple buttons and you're ready to go. So as long as you got good fuel on board, you can pretty much run any boost on the fly. This is for alarm reset. Right now it shows no alarms active. So we can just turn that on anytime there is an alarm. The driver can just acknowledge it real quick and that'll make the condition or the alarm go away. We can use previous to cycle the dash around or next. We kind of eat up some of these buttons on the keypad. Normally we just have a next button and you just hold down next to get to the different screens. There's also a practice screen available, but on this particular car I just programmed to warm up and erase. So you can dim and brighten it here. Bright, you really can't see it on the video, so I've got it on dim. So I apologize if it's a bit dark. We also can override the oil fans here with this one. We just have to have the engine running and we can turn those on and check our oil cooler fans. We've also got launch control on this car. So people call it anti-lag, people call it a two-step, a three-step, all these different things, launch control, whatever. Basically it's to get the turbo up on boost while you're sitting there on the starting line so you can launch and have maximum power to leave with. So this is all done in the ECU, but we send this data over to the ECU. Now we don't have a PDM in this car, but we do have the ability to use the keypad with the dash. It's some pretty custom programming to do that, but it is something that we offer. So if you have a dash and you're interested in installing a keypad and you don't have a PDM, give us a call, write us an email. You know, we can go through something, figure out your configuration and get a setup for you. We also have this wired in where he can control, you know, a fog light or a light bar. Initially we thought we'd put one on the car, so we have that here. We have some other things here that we just have placeholders in. One thing that's cool about this car is it does have auto start. So you can start the car through the factory key if you want, but Matt really wanted to, you know, add some flavor to it or whatever. And you simply just push this one time and it'll go ahead and run the starter until the engine is running in a running state, and it turns the starter solenoid off automatically. So that part's pretty cool. I'll show that a little bit later. This button here is kind of fun because you've got all these different boost levels, you know, 6 to do on the fly, but let's say you're racing somebody and you're losing and you don't want to lose and you don't have time to sit here and push this thing up. Like you can see, I was kind of pushing it, and if you don't have a real solid click there, you may not get it up to the maximum boost level. This can be used as like a scramble boost. So if you just push this and that goes active, that's going to put it at your maximum boost, whatever you have set in the ECU. So if you're running 179 pounds of boost up the sand mountain, you just hit this and you're running 179 pounds of boost and you're just ripping through there. So this is just meant to give it all it's got, more or less. So the other thing I wanted to show you is a fuel reset. I mentioned that earlier. So let me get back to the warm-up screen. And you can see that we've just got a little bit of fuel used because we filled it up and ran it for just a little bit. And so our tank level's at 97%. So the way we program this is if you hit fuel reset, you just hold this down. And you can't really read that on the video, but it says fuel reset. So back to 9 gallons in the tank. This will go through for the total fuel used up to this point. We can also reset the total fuel used if we hold down the fuel reset for a much longer time. Not sure if I have that set up on this particular car or not, but I'll go ahead and hold this and see if we can get total fuel reset. There we go. So now all of that is zeroed out. So the cool thing about this is if you go riding for a weekend and you want to know kind of how much fuel you actually used, you can keep the total fuel used running. This works well in road cars, road race cars or circuit cars, because they want to know how much fuel they're burning through in a race, or so that they can bring a proper amount of fuel for the next race, or for their engine builder, or how much time, or all of that can be tracked and preserved in the dash. Now, that still gives you the ability to do a fuel reset. You just hold it down for less time, go through and do a fuel reset, once this gets down to, 5% or 10% or 30 or whatever is low for you, you come back, you fill it all the way up, you do a full fuel reset, that resets your fuel tank level. So this can be useful, like I said, in different racing applications, but for this particular one, we set this up for Matt. So let me show you kind of the software. Show you kind of one thing here where I said the launch control can kind of come over here back to the ECU. So let me just kind of show you this screen live. So right now, if you take a look on screen here, we have a driver launch aim switch. So just purposes of this video, I put the numbers pretty low because we don't want to be giving away any secrets or anything. So we've got position 1, I push it, we go to position 2, I push it, we go to position 3. And if you see here, there's actually 9 positions plus the 0 that you can roll through. And I just have it set up for 3 positions because we've only got 3 LEDs, so it's simple for the driver to know and say, well, what level of launch am I on if we set this at 25,000 and this is 26,000 and this is 27,000. He's going to know where he's going to launch at. So we've kind of got that here, and this just shows how it rolls through live as far as the launch control. Now we can retard timing, we can add fuel, we can take fuel away, we can add timing, but we also have a closed loop system for the launch control. So if we've got like a boost target that we want to launch with, the MoTeC system will move the timing around and it will raise and lower the timing on the two-step to hit that target boost. So it takes a little bit of setting up, but it actually works really well. So it prevents an overboost situation where somebody's hanging you out on the tree and you're just sitting there waiting to leave or whatever, and your car's banging on the chip and you don't want it to sit there and continually build boost. The ECU will put timing back into the engine and make it so the boost will actually come down, because in a two-step or anti-lag scheme, we're going to retard the timing, sometimes past 0 degrees to get it to make a lot of boost sitting there on the anti-lag or the two-step. So it's really cool. It's got a proportional piece. It's got an integral piece. You can fine-tune the adjustments on that and make the system basically hit target boost quickly and hold it and leave with that every single time. So that's one of the features of the launch control. The other one that I was going to show you guys is the boost control. So what I have here on this screen here is, like I said, 6 different levels. You can count up with these keypads, you can count down. So I've programmed that in the dash. It's similar to what you do in a PDM, but a little bit different. So that's called our engine boost limit. So if you look over here on this part of the screen, you're going to see that this thing can rise as I push it. So we're level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5, level 6. And whatever our target boost is, this will get trimmed. So we'll have basically 6 different positions. You can limit this to 3 positions. You can have 10. You can have 5. It just kind of depends on how you want to program the system. So that's kind of a brief rundown of some of the features on this dash and keypad combo. So the next thing I wanted to show you guys is the auto start. I went through some of the features there with the boost control and the launch control and a few other things. Obviously I could spend just 100 hours going through all the different features and talking about tuning schemes and all that stuff, but just show you real quick the auto start's real simple. This is all done inside the M1. Just basically push this at one time and it'll run the starter until the engine is in a running condition. So the next piece that I want to take you through on this side-by-side of Matt's is some of the dash features. The dashes are really cool. They're a lot more complex and advanced than just a simple display or gauges. A lot of people think I don't want to spend thousands of dollars and just have gauges. Well, obviously, yeah, they do gauges, but they do a lot of other things. One of the things that they have built into them is a shift light module. So this works really well in the YXZs because if we have a different engine in here, a different drivetrain than what we run from the factory, we're probably going to have some different shift points or a bigger turbo or anything like that. So we can program the shift points. We can have a different level or several different levels of upshift lights. So we can have just one that's showing you that you're coming up on the limiter, show one that you're really close to the shift point. We can show you that you're on the shift point, and then we can show you, hey, you went past it or whatever. And we do all that through just light illustration. So you can simply look forward, and focus on the race, focus on cutting a light. And when you launch, you can just grab the gears as you go and simply just watch the shift lights, and they're going to give you some direction on what's going on in the car. You're not going to have to look down and follow your tack or listen for the engine to tap the limiter before you shift. I mean, there's different things guys do in drag racing. So this is just a driver indicator to say, hey, it's time to shift. We also use it for warnings, the shift light module that's built in. So if you're low on oil pressure, if you're low on fuel pressure, we can give an alarm with text on there that'll show what the problem is. If you're out of injector, we can set that in the M1 system to say, hey, you're at 120% injector duty. Get off the throttle. We can also do some more advanced engine protection in the dash, which is really cool. This is why I always like to put a dash in with any system. And you can do this with an M800 or an M400, but you can also do it with the M1. Now, there is a lot of engine protection stuff already built into the M1, so you don't need to have a dash, you know, to have it lambda protection per se. So if the engine gets lean, it's automatically going to cut and invoke a rev limiter. You can set for how long you need it in that condition before it sets the rev limiter, or how long before that condition has to go away before it'll restore power and give you the full rev limiter again. You can do that with oil pressure, etc. So one of the things that I like to do is do it inside the dash. So I'm going to take you through some of the alarms. I'm going to flip my camera here, kind of go through some of the different alarms that I use for engine protection. And a little story or background on this particular car. We really didn't have a lot of time to get it ready for when Matt wanted to race it. So we pretty much went through a lot of dyno testing. We ran it for a couple of days on the dyno, changing setups, changing fuel, looking at some different things, and just making sure that the engine was good and everything was right on point for Matt. You know, we started out with this car on a power commander system, and then we morphed it into the MoTeC system. And really, Matt's biggest concern in jumping up to the MoTeC was he really wanted engine protection. He'd had some other failures on some other systems, on some other projects, and he's like, look, you know, if the thing's lean, I want it to cut, and that could have happened a bunch of other times. But instead of it cutting, he had to buy a motor. So the cool thing about this car is this is the original motor that we put in this thing, and it has taken a beating. Several races, several two-step launches. You know, it went through the stock rear end. It's got a billet rear end in it now. It's got just tons of hours on the dyno. Well, I won't say tons of hours on the dyno, but tons of dyno passes. It's got races on it, and really all we've done is just kind of service the valves and put fuel in it and just keep running it. So one of the reasons for that is because we've been able to use the engine protection. So a little bit of a long explanation there, but so I'll phase the video out now. I'll show you this engine protection stuff, and hopefully I don't miss anything. All right, so we're in the dash here, and one of the cool things about this is, like I said in the previous part of the video, you can keep using your M1 for your basic engine protection, and I shouldn't say basic because it does a really good job inside there, and you can get pretty granular on how you want to protect the engine. But I like to use some things inside the dash just to tweak it a little further. So these are all the warnings that we have or alarms in this particular dash. The you'll see here this warning source. That basically means that we're starting with the M1. So the M1 is going to give us a setup for, let's say this one here, engine hot. This is going to be if the coolant temp is, you know, at a certain temperature, it's going to invoke the warning for the coolant temp. And we have something here saying that warning plus the engine's been over 1,000 RPM for 10 seconds. Because a lot of times if you turn off a car and it heat soaks and you fire it back up, it might be over that threshold for your, you know, your coolant temp might be over 210 or whatever you're setting for your threshold. So I like to use the dash to add another little piece to the condition. So every time when your car stops and you go to start it back up, you're not getting an alarm for the driver. So he thinks it's hot or whatever, and it's just kind of heat soaked for a minute. After 10 seconds, you've cycled the water through in the radiator and it's cooling back down. So this is why I like to use the dash. Let's go through this engine lean one. This is one that I kind of talked about for the engine protection that we've used on Matt's car a lot. So in this one, we're looking for, well, let me go through this first. These warnings are set up with conditions. So you can program these to say, look, if I have a certain lambda that's too lean, plus I'm in this gear, plus I'm, you know, at this boost level or this throttle or this temperature or this oil pressure, you can kind of just keep building these themes or schemes. And you've got 6 available here for these different conditions that can set off this one alarm. So you can get really crazy with the programming if you want here. So on this particular one, I've got something that for anything over 0.85 lambda for 2 seconds. And the engine over 9,600, so that means we're really getting after it. The RPM is up. The boost is over 29 pounds. And the engine isn't up to the limiter yet. So let's say, you know, our limiter is around 10.8 or 11 or something like that. So we're kind of in this range. And I want it to be in 3rd gear because these cars in 2nd gear, they kind of ride out the limiter for a minute. And, you know, when it's hitting the limiter, it can show a lean condition. So I don't want to prematurely set off this alarm and limit the motor. So I'll show you how I do that in just a minute. So we can put out a message anytime this happens and say engine lean. And we can show it when the alarm was triggered or the current value. I like to use when the alarm was triggered because if current value is restored to a non-lean condition, then people are going to wonder why it happened. So you also have some options here. You can automatically remove the message. I generally don't do that on this particular one because I want them to be able to see the warning flashing up here and take their eyes and go, what was that warning? And they go, okay, that was engine lean, and they hit alarm reset. And then they can call me or send me an email and say, look, I got an engine lean alarm. Okay, we'll pull a log, we'll take a look at it. We make it so it doesn't come back for 10 more seconds. And in here, we don't activate the warning light because we have a different light here, and we output this alarm engine lean channel that we created in the dash. So we hit OK. In here, we're going to go through next, and I'll show you under functions, you go to the shift light module, and you'll see these are all the different patterns that I've created for different alarms. So there's a sort of a purple or magenta color for this engine lean. These 3 on the side here are going to be these 3 on the side here. And these 3 at the end over here are going to be for this side. So I'm not lighting any of those up. I'm just showing all these lights across the top here anytime the engine is lean. So we're flashing those things 100% brightness. We're flashing between black and magenta. And we're really getting your attention because these things are very, very bright when they're on kill. So the cool thing about this is I can set up this alarm, and if the driver does not acknowledge the alarm by either lifting the throttle or by pushing this, obviously if you're in the middle of a race, you're not going to hit alarm and keep racing. You're going to go, well, there's a problem, and lift. What I do is I take it a step further in the dash software, and I send the status of that alarm back over to the M1. And by doing that, I can then change the current rev limiter of the engine. So if on this particular car, if we're revving it up to 11,000 or 10.8 or 10.5 or whatever we're taking it to, I can limit it to 7,000 or 6,000. And the good thing about that is sometimes you got guys that are carried away, or you've got a new driver in a car or something, and they're just getting after it. They're grabbing gears. They're not watching the screen. They're focusing on racing. We can take the driver out of it. So it's probably going to piss them off when they get back to the bottom of the hill or back to the pit. But the good thing is we're not going to live in that lean condition for very long. So I have this program to where if the lean condition is active for a certain amount of time, I'll show you exactly what it is. So just on the screen now with this user condition. So anytime the warning source is greater than 0, or this alarm engine lean is true, then it's going to turn on that rev limiter in the M1. Now you might say, well, what if that just flips a lean condition and all of a sudden you don't want the racer or the driver to be able to just instantly get stopped anytime the engine is lean. Well, if you remember back, I had some time tied to that, and I had certain windows in the RPM where I only want to look at the engine being lean, and it's pretty lean. It's over 0.5 lambda, so we know it's, or sorry, 0.85 lambda. So we know that the engine is lean. We know it's in third gear. We know it's in an RPM range where he's really getting after it. We also have boost tied to that. And all of that has to be active for 2 seconds. Or that lean condition has to be active for 2 seconds. Once it is, it's going to trigger the alarm lean. And if any time that's on, that's going to come over to the B switch on the engine speed limit in the M1. And it's going to limit how the rev limiter is active. So it's going to take it from 10.8 or whatever down to 6 or 7. It's going to abort the run, and it's going to save the engine. Matt probably hit this thing 25 times when we first turned him loose with the car, because he took it to Oregon right off the dyno. We didn't have much time. We didn't have good internet service up there, and we just kind of had to wing it. And he saw the alarms. He called me, and we were able to make adjustments, but we kind of tuned in the alarm. I had it pretty conservative. I think I had it at like a half a second before. So if the thing ever went lean at all, we were just cutting it. And, the good story of that is it saved his engine. So a lot of people talk about the cost of the system. I mean, it's not cheap. These dashes, the keypad, obviously the M1 ECU, all the extra sensors and things. You can get into the system for a decent cost and just have an M1. And have most of that engine protection like I was talking about, have all these different features, boost control on the fly, flex fuel, all of that. But the cool thing about the MoTeC system is you can grow into it. You can buy a dash later. You can buy a keypad if you want one. You can do a PDM if you really want one, to wire up your entire car and run all your fans and fuel pumps and different things like that. So, but it's a lot cheaper than a motor rebuild. That's what I always tell everybody. So, you don't have this sort of thing with some of the other systems, at least not this advanced. You can't do it with, oil pressure and all these other things, oil temp. I mean, we can make these conditions in this dash do kind of whatever you want to dream up. We can do it. So it's definitely cheaper than an engine is what I'm getting at, because you're going to spend some money getting into the system, but if you're racing or you're riding these things hard through the dunes, you're going to be beating on them, and you need that system to be able to step in for you and take the driver out of it, so to speak, and just put things back to a normal rev limiter, stop what's going on, pull a log, reset, go back out, enjoy the rest of the weekend rather than having a burned up motor. Okay, so the next portion that I want to take you through is the simulation in the dash. So this is one of my favorite things because you can kind of spot check everything you're doing. For example, we had that alarm engine lean code that we'd set up that engine condition or that condition. So anytime that it runs engine lean, we need to go into simulation and try and simulate those same conditions. So we've got our engine speed. If you double click on this, you can just set this. So I've gone ahead and set this to 10,000 RPM. The exhaust lambda, we're going to go down here. That's already set at 1.23. We'll just go ahead and set it at 1 for now. Now we can go to our dash and see that our engine speed is 10,000 and our exhaust lambda is 1.0. So we're super lean right now. We've got a bunch of engine RPM. The other portion of that was that we had gear in there. So we want to go ahead and scroll through this list, double click on this, create gear number 3 because we had 3 as our minimum. The other thing that we had was boost pressure. So we're going to go here and we're going to find boost pressure. And I think we had it greater than like 29 pounds or something like that. We'll just put this at 40. Okay, now as you can see, we've simulated all those conditions and we've got alarm engine lean. This is what's going to be flashing at the driver, and we can simulate all these alarms. Now this is great if you're, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this off. If you ever, I got to close the software, let me do that and shut this down. Okay, if you're in like a trophy truck or something where you're not going to be around your tuner or your programmer, as a tuner or programmer, you need to figure this stuff out before you send some guys to a race, because if the truck gets hot or their project gets hot, coolant temp wise, oil pressure gets low, oil temp gets high, whatever, all this stuff needs to, you know, tell the crew or the driver or whoever that this stuff is going on, and one way to double check all that is through this simulation tab. So like I said, if we go to alarms, we have all of these, and we can simulate the conditions that trigger each one: low fuel or high injector duty, or low fuel pressure, or the oil hot, or low oil pressure, etc. And we can spot check to see what the actual alarm is going to look like and make sure that you've got it programmed correctly, because it's easy to flip a greater than, a less than sign, an equal to when you're doing some of the programming on these alarms. So that may be a little more advanced than what the video needs to get into, but that just kind of shows you some higher features. This isn't just a display. There's a lot of more things you can do with it. You know, it's got an open CAN bus. It's got 2 CAN buses actually. It's open CAN receive and transmit. So for advanced users, you can really do a lot of things to send data across the CAN network to other devices, across different platforms. So, but again, it's probably stretching out to more of what some of the advanced features are on this particular combination. So, all right, so for the last portion of the video, I just kind of want to scan over this turbo kit on this particular car. This is really the shelf turbo kit that K&T offers for the YXZ. I mean, we've gone ahead and added an oil cooler here, and tonight we just installed these IGN 1A smart coils. These are from AEM. A bunch of different people make these, but this just gives us a lot more spark energy. But this kit is what you buy for your run-of-the-mill turboed YXZ. It's the exact same intake manifold. It's got the fuel rail that comes with the system. It's the exact same header that's on it. Really all that's changed is it's got a different turbo. It's got a different wastegate. Of course, the MoTeC system, but it's got a wideband, and the intercooler fans are on here just the same. It's an air-to-air intercooler. It's really a pretty straightforward system. We had this on here and made a whole bunch of horsepower. Obviously the engine is built, obviously the fuel upgrades are there. We've got some Injector Dynamics 2000 cc injectors in here, I believe. Or no, these are 1700s, I believe. I can't remember exactly. So this actually features one of the newer upgrades that Matt has done on the car. This is something that Race and I talked about doing. This is a mechanical fuel pump. We run these on a lot of the drag cars. One of the downsides to the YXZ is the charging system. You know, it just leaves a lot to be desired, and they've got an alternator kit to help boost that up. But the cool thing about a mechanical fuel pump is a couple of things. You get tons of fuel flow when you need it and not much fuel flow when you don't. When you have a mechanical fuel pump, it's only spinning at half of the engine RPM, so the flow of the fuel is just kind of what you need. But if you've got a big electric fuel pump, you're constantly spinning that fuel, you're heating the fuel up, and you know, over time you can boil that fuel and start to have some problems with performance. So this works great. As you can see, no problem starting it up. Works great with the whole system that they've got there. And of course, you don't have to run multiple pumps to have a bunch of pressure and a bunch of fuel flow. You can just buy this system from K&T, put it right on your YXZ. Like you see here, everything comes, there's bracketry, pretty easy to plumb. You know, the fuel filter's back here, and it just comes right off the pump here and right up to the rails here, or rail, I should say. There's only one rail in this car. So yeah, this was a recent upgrade. You know, you can put a bunch of different fuel pumps in there and try a bunch of different things, but you can never go wrong with mechanical fuel on anything turbocharged. So again, pretty basic system that comes from K&T. Still the stock oil tank. We put oil temp sensor in the bottom of it. Kind of see that in the bottom there, so we're monitoring the tank temperature. We get great performance out of this little oil cooler. This is all automatically controlled through the MoTeC. The intercooler fans are controlled by air temp in the MoTeC. So if you do have the stock voltage system and you know, you turn the key on with a lot of the turbo kits out there, you can't control this when the fans are on. So if you're just trying to pull a log or you know, trying to reprogram something, you got the key on, your fans are going to be running. A lot of people wire them up with the ignition switch. With us, we ran a relay for it. We use the MoTeC to control the relay for these fans. These turn on at a certain oil temp. These turn on at a certain air temp. Obviously, the coolant fan turns on at a certain water temp. So total control over the system. Anyhow, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this video now. I hope you enjoyed all the features I went through. Some of it's very granular, some of it's super technical, some of it's really easy, but you know, this just kind of goes through the system, kind of explaining some benefits as to why you need a dash, what you can use it for, what you can use the keypad for, and keep in mind, you don't always have to have a PDM to use your keypad. A lot of people think that you got to have a PDM to work in conjunction with it. But shown here, a lot of features you can use it for. It's just some custom programming that we've come up with to do so. So again, like and subscribe to the videos. Give us some feedback of what you're looking for, what you like, what you'd like to see more of. We're getting tons of feedback from you guys. I appreciate it. So share the videos, like them, hit the notify, hit subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll see you again on the next video. Thanks.